Welcome to the Sonic Days podcast, where we get into the many different aspects of audio. This season is recorded live at Sonic Days 2024. How do you make amplified voices sound natural in a grand theater setting? How can technology enhance performance without the audience even noticing? In this episode of the Sonic Days podcast, we're diving into the world of sound localization, the techniques used to track and amplify voices seamlessly in live theater. Joining us to break down the principles and real-world applications of sound tracking is Jonas Vest, Tonemester at the Danish Royal Theatre.
Okay, I think the time is up for me to start. And welcome. I was told to do this in English, and I will try the best I can. My name is Jonas Vest, and I work at the Royal Danish Theatre as a tonemester and sound designer. This will be a practical and brief introduction to how we approach tracking and localization of sound at the theatre. And I'm very honored to be here in this amazing room with, actually, I'm tracked right now. We will get back to that. But it's important for me to mention that I'm product independent. I have the privilege of working in a cultural institution where we can choose what we want. And I really mean it's a privilege for me because I work with American speakers and French speakers and German speakers, and we can swap in between them. And I will try to give you an introduction to how we use tracking and equipment at the theatre. So the first thing we could ask ourselves is why? Why is this important? And to go back to the nature of human perception, we need to understand that we people have ears and we have eyes. And when we experience something in a room, we use both senses and even more senses than that. This is not only about sound and audio. This is about experiences in a room. We see something and then we expect to hear something. And we hear something and then we expect to see something. It's connected in many ways. And of course, this is how people work. It's how we survive outside in traffic. It's how we prevent being crushed by a bus because we hear something and then we see it. So that's how nature of human perception works. And there we have the problem, because then we start to do something in a room, we start to amplify, for example, the voice, and then we have the problem until now. Because this tagline I picked up from the old company Timex in England, and I thought it was such a brilliant way to explain the nature of what this is about, that our ears guides our eyes. So that's how it is. We hear bang and then we pinpoint it. And I'm sure you're all aware of how it works. The arrival time and the micro timing shifts and the frequency shifts between the ears works so we can pinpoint within 2 or 3 degrees in the horizontal plane of where is the sound coming from. That's how it works. So when we are in an auditorium doing something on stage, then we put up speakers, and then things starts to go wrong. Because to go back to the very basic setup, that's still the nature a lot of places, playing something out in a stereo system, we have the problem. Because no matter how good it sounds, no matter how great the mix is, we do not have a connection between the visuals and the sound, at least for very few people sitting right in the middle. That's what this is all about. So you get really annoyed by having a singer or an actor standing here, and when you sit just a little to the side, I really get annoyed this day of hearing a line array mix playing the voice of something happening 15 meters this way. So it's a problem that we have a mismatch between the visuals and the audio. Another problem that I will demonstrate in this small talk is that we have a mismatch between the unamplified sound and the amplified sound. And you are all aware about the technical terms with comb filtering and phasing and what that causes, but it's important for us as sound people to know this, to be able to communicate it to other people that are not aware of how this works. So I will walk you through a simple way of understanding this. Another problem that I will illustrate as well is that sound is very slow. So we are aware of that in a distributed system, that we have to deal with timing in a lot of ways because sound is moving so slow. So even in a room like this, there are differences. And that, of course, you know the theory about it, I think, that we have to deal with it, and especially in larger systems, because in smaller systems we can maneuver within a tolerance where we accept small time shifts of arrival. But in larger systems, it becomes like significant echoes. So you know the speed of sound, and here you can see what's going wrong when you are on stage. There's someone speaking, and the speaker is putting out sound, and we have a mismatch between two sounds, resulting in unpleasant comb filtering. So that's one problem. And you can translate the simple illustrations in what happens when you have several speakers and a lot of speakers and one source, and you need the speakers to represent this source. So that's where tracking can save us from at least some of the problems, knowing that all we do is a compromise. And it's an interesting discussion also between companies, different approaches to how to solve this, because since we have a lot of seats in an auditorium, who are we doing the sound for? It's another discussion. We have a lot of compromises there, but I will show you our approach to it. And I hope we haven't tested this, but just so everybody knows, it could be interesting to give an example. You're aware that when playing a mono signal in two speakers sitting in the middle give you an image coming from the center. And when you play with a slight delay, the image shift to the first arriving sound within some limits. If you go above 30 milliseconds, you will start distinguishing an echo. But we could do a small demo here. Hopefully it will work. Playing material to begin with, like this, and then I will introduce delay, and hopefully we can see for ourselves that the image shifts. So first let's listen to an old speak from a museum. Playing in mono.
Et mere end 1000 år gammelt engelsk heltekvad fortæller historien om den tapre kriger Beowulf, der befrier lejre fra et morderisk monster ved navn Grendel.
And hopefully you more or less can feel that it's coming from the center, what we can call a phantom center. Now I will introduce a delay of, let's say, 8 milliseconds, and now hear what's happened.
Et mere end 1000 år gammelt engelsk heltekvad fortæller historien om den tapre kriger Beowulf, der befrier lejre fra et morderisk monster ved navn Grendel.
So it actually works that the level is completely the same, but hopefully you experience that the sound is coming from the first arriving source. You understand? Yeah? And just to illustrate, if I turn up the level going further up, now we have 30 milliseconds.
Et mere end 1000 år gammelt engelsk
think you will
heltekvad
slightly
fortæller
start hearing
historien om
a
den
delay.
tapre kriger Beowulf, der befrier lejre fra et morderisk monster ved navn Grendel.
So hopefully that illustrates for everybody what the problem is with doing too much delay, that it will simply become a small Elvis echo, and that's not what we want. But within the tolerances of the Haas theory, we can mingle with the delay to help the localization and the image. And actually, because it is a discussion, is it good to do that? Because we of course we mingle with the face as well, but being in a creative environment, working with multiple speakers, often moving the speakers as well, that's exactly the same as delaying them. But just to be very humble about this, everything is still a compromise. It's not the holy grail, and it's not a new theory, but it's just the nature of time-based panning, as you would call it. And back to this. So, to show you what we are doing at Skuespilhuset, the National Royal Playhouse in Copenhagen. You can see it here. It opened in 2008 by the Harbourfront, and we are happy about the architecture. It's very functionalistic and pleasant place to stay. Here's the auditorium that's quite intimate even for It's the largest auditorium, and there's 650 seats, and the distance to the back row is around 21 meter. You're very close together there. Here you can see a plot from above, and the speakers were put up in 2008, and we are proud of that. In 2008, quite some years ago, we put up 5 positions across the stage, thanks to Carsten Volstad, that everybody knows, who evaluated on this very early, doing some workshops at the National Danish Theatre School, concluding together with other people that 5 positions would be what we needed to do a equal panning across the stage. So he was a first mover, and to supplement, of course, there's a lot of other speakers, but it's important to say that in these installations, front fills are essential. And we have even a row of speakers on stage that we still evaluate on how using. It's a discussion about first wavefront. Sometimes it's coming from the actor's mouth. It's the best because it's the natural source. When we play a little louder, we can put the first arrival sound source coming from stage speakers. I will get back to different examples of usage of this. So what we want to do and what we are doing is this. We have a source, and we try to have separate delay and separate gain for every source. And now it gets complicated because when moving, we need to adjust all these parameters on the fly, and it's difficult for equipment to mingle with time. I remember this anecdote from when David Bowie heard from Brian Eno about the Eventide harmonizer, the H910. Brian Eno was supposed to explain what does it do, this machine, Bowie asked, and Eno replied, well, it fucks with the fabric of time. And then David Bowie was hooked because it sounds like magic. And to tell this, it is full of compromises to mingle with time live, because you can't really do that. Even though there are manufacturers trying to do that with different algorithms, filtering out the problems, doing voodoo and magic, so you can adjust time with live signal on. The compromises can be if you have a vocal singing a note that you will hear some slight pitch artifacts, but for spoken words or percussive material, you can't hear the artifacts of it. So how do we control this? And this is what this is about. We use a tracking system. And we use a tracking system that is controlling an audio matrix. And what is a tracking system and what is an audio matrix? You can see we send, just to pinpoint, there's no audio going on in the tracking system, but it sends control data to the audio matrix. Here's an image illustrating what a tracking system could be. There are several manufacturers. I will mention a lot of them in a while. But a lot of them do it like this, including SACTRAC that is in the room now, having anchors or antennas at known positions, receiving signals from a TAC. And then if you are familiar with how a GPS system works, by having synchronized pulses picked up by an antenna, you can kind of reverse engineer the distances. And it's kind of the same here because it's a matter of triangulation of arrival time. So it works by, this is sending out pulses, and each pulse is received by an antenna, and then the algorithm knows the nature of the room, the size, the proportions, and then it can calculate if this is the timing, then the beacon or tag must be here. So that's how it works. And it works in real time, and things that can be adjusted and discussed is the refresh rate of this tag. For normal movement, I would say that 10 hertz, 10 pulses per second would be more than enough for tracking an actor moving on stage. You could argue that you should go higher if it's fast, but for sound localization, it's fast enough. It's another discussion for lights. And even though the manufacturers are trying to sell their products for both sound and light, we have different criteria for it in terms of resolution and precision. Yeah, here we have some audio matrices, and it's a box having sound coming in, sound coming out, and doing the magic. The simple explanation is cross points, like a big matrix, having the possibility to adjust one input to all outputs with individual delay and time. So everything is very much a matter of algorithm and software controlling it. So this is just to give you an idea what the demands are. Here I have made a list of different tracking systems. The Timex, they are considered the godfathers because they have been doing this for, what would you say, under 30 years or more, at least, yeah. TTA, a Norwegian company, SACTRAC in the room right now. Blacktracks, it's another approach because it's a visual systems with camera seeing, I think it's IR lights from small beacons. It's very, very precise, but then you need to have beacons on it. CVO, it's a system that we use right now at Skuespilhuset. And January, we will test a French system called Now Stage. And it's a camera-based AI tracking system with no beacons on the actors. So we are very excited about how that would work. It's like a bar with thermical cameras and IR cameras and a lot of algorithm pinpointing who's who. Here you can see the name of different providers of the audio matrix. Timex, TTA, DS100 from DNB, Maya. I'm very curious about the new Nadia. I don't know anything about it, but I just heard in the previous presentation that I heard the name Object mentioned and timing cross points, and so that's exciting. The Fletcher machine, Adamson's, maybe it's here in the next room, I think so. I heard that these guys said that they are doing something right, and because guys respect these guys as well, and everybody is kind of in the same game here. And then we have the French, I don't know it, but it's very advanced algorithm, the SPAT, and L-Acoustics ELISA, having a slightly other approach, but very aware of uncorrelated and correlated signals. At least that was an explanation I got from you, Anders, when you called me one day, being excited that now you got it, now you know what's going on inside the box. But I'm just mentioning all these systems because we as users, we can actually combine them. And we have used several combinations at the Royal Theatre. We had a TTA system controlling a Timex. We had a TTA system controlling a TTA. We had a TTA system controlling a DNB system. We tried the SACTRACs controlling the DNB system. Right now, the CVO system at the main stage is controlling the TTA audio engine that is not produced anymore. So just to pinpoint that this is not magic, this is a combination and constant evaluation of different products and how to use them. So another thing that I will briefly mention, that to control this, we need some software, and now I just call it gatekeeper software. That might be another word that's better. Because it's a creative discussion. Sometimes we want to track, sometimes we do not want to track, sometimes it's disturbing, sometimes we want to only track a few actors and some actors should not move at all. So we need some software to keep track of this. I will not go into the details, but you can see some different systems. And we have the privilege at theatre to have Rasmus Kreiner employed, and he has recently just wrote his own that we actually use right now. So the idea is like controlling on-off for individual actors, freeze and presets. And at Østre Gasværk Teater, they use right now the Atlas software, doing kind of the same as Angsnap from DNB. And they use it in a creative way, having different presets, like telling we could make a distribution that is, now we're going wide and everything's just wide, and now we are narrow. Now we have the choir in a wide position, but the lead actor is tracked. So that's the job of this gatekeeper software. Okay, now I will talk you through some examples from the theater. I don't know, I'm just talking. Do you have any questions to this brief overview? No? I will mention 5 or 6 examples of usage. just to give you an idea of that this is not a constant thing. It's a creative tool. All the time we fiddle with it and evaluate and is this better and now it's good, now it's not. But in 2008, when the Royal Drama House opened, we played Hamlet with Niklas Bro, and it was acoustic because this house is an acoustic house and we can play without amplification. But the ghost, the dead father of Hamlet, had this cloud of reverb that were tracked. So when he spoke, the reverb trail was like mingling around him. And it was really magic, and we were proud of that effect. So it was only one. Then later on, we did this production, Fanny and Alexander, and it was unamplified again, but we have 2 kids playing in it, and they simply couldn't speak loud enough for this. So we amplified them with microports in the hair, and we tracked them. And it really helped us to blend in the amplification, because it sounded natural. We kind of forgot that they were amplified and the other actors weren't, due to the tracking, because we had the right relation. In this production, Frankenstein, we only tracked the dialogue. When they were speaking between the songs, the dialogue was tracked. But when we went into the song that was quite hard rock, it was a conventional left, center, right distribution. And it worked, having this more powerful rock mix. And then when the song was finished, then we swapped into tracking the dialogue. A few years ago, I did Hobbiten outdoors. It wasn't tracked, but we still tried to give the audience an idea of where the sound was coming from. So we aim outdoor, it's very broad and it's 70 meters wide, to have a PA system where each position covers the whole audience. And by doing that, we can shift from speaker to speaker to speaker, having a rough illusion of who's talking and who's not talking. But it was programmed in QLab. It was programmed by simply programming, oh, he's there, now we have a cue, oh, he's there. So it was a bumpy ride, but it helped to understand it. I would love to do a real tracking out there. Here you can see the speaker system for this production with 5 arrays of Kiva speakers. To do proper tracking out there, we need more positions, and it becomes difficult in this size. Another example of mingling with time, did West Side Story at the opera, and we had a left, center, right system. There was no tracking on this due to budget and due to short production time, but every musician's microphone was handled individually by having individual delays from each position. So it was done in the software I told you before, positioning that this violin or cello is sitting there. Then we have the cross-point distribution giving all the right timings. And it worked really well. We got a lot of compliments for the orchestra sound on that production. And I tried, even live during a production, to bypass the system. And it was significant. The mix did not change. It still sounded good. But it was like saying hello to the speakers. And when you enabled it, it was goodbye to the speakers. So it's always pleasant to have the speakers vanish. And that's kind of the definition of immersive, that you should immerse yourself into the drama, not into the speakers. Yeah, maybe I'm rushing, but we will finish soon and then we can have a few questions. This Friday, we opened a production at the Playhouse Pinocchio, and it's fully tracked. All actors are tracked, and then we had one dilemma because Pinocchio is represented by this puppet. Sometimes it's a real person, and the voice of the Pinocchio is given by 2 fairies maneuvering the puppet around. And it works when they are together with the puppet. Then you have the illusion, and they are good actors, and you are involved. But there are some scenes where the puppet sits alone. Or at a later point, he is represented by a dancer with a big head. And the fairies are speaking from upstage, being hidden by something. And then things starts to go wrong because I track the fairies and now it's really weird. But then we put a tracker in the doll's head and then having snapshot controller for that, so we could bump into, now we track the doll and put the fairies' voices in that direction, and it really worked well. Then you are, oh, he's speaking. No, he's not. He's backstage. So that solved it in this production. Yeah. So it was some practical examples of how we use it at the theater. And I hope you get an idea if that there's not one way, there's not one correct way. There's a lot of things to consider, and a lot of things to consider about the speaker layout, whether the speakers should aim to do everything by themselves, or are we using a combination of several speakers? Depends on the algorithm and the usage. Another discussion that's interesting is SPL. How loud do we play? Because there are some thresholds. If you play louder than normal voice amplifications, you start to reveal some problems that you can't hear when playing slightly lower. And it all comes back to the first wavefront, because what's the best sound? It's coming acoustically from the mouse, and it's actually significant in a small auditorium. We can't have a PA hat put on each actor giving the sound, but we tend to have this idea that we want to put the focus on the actors. And there's a discussion about SPL that's very relevant, because it's also something that kind of reveals the limitations of all systems when we amplify. So now this was a lot of input to you about what we do, and feel free to come and ask me about stuff. And I'm just so happy that this is now all over the place, and I'm also proud that the Royal Theatre, actually we tracked stuff in 2008. So we were early movers, but now it's on everybody's tongue, and even the artistic management at the theatre starts to wake up to say, oh, this is something new, and we try to explain, no, it's not that new, but yes, it is new because the focus is there now, and we are right now doing it on all stages. Billy Elliot opening soon at the Opera, Pinocchio at the Playhouse, and in January we will do Jeppe på bjerget with this AI-based tracking system. So happy tracking, or what should you say? Thanks.
Can you say something about when you're using a tracking system which is based on level and timing? You will get some sweet spots in the audiences, in the auditorium, because, as you know, I'm colored by a specific.
Yeah.
So, what happens in the extreme areas of the audience?
But it's a creative decision, because it's about width. Because if you go very wide and play in a lot of speakers, then you, when playing transient, you reveals the problems for more people than playing like keyboard pads or choir without transients. So it's something to consider of what you put in the speakers and how you adjust the width of every. Timex call it image definitions, and you could call it zones, and DNB call it objects, and how wide do you go? Because of course there are limitations, but it's at least better than doing nothing, because when going over here, I don't know if it's tracking right now and how it's, but in an auditorium it's really annoying sitting over there if the front field speakers are not delayed now, because my acoustic reference interferes with the delay. So we definitely need delay timing solved across the stage. But I'm totally aware that it's full of compromises still, and it's very dependent of how you define the first wavefront. What's that? So some of the theory will be different, I guess, in larger system, but when you have acoustic reference as the first wavefront, I think this is the only way to deal with it. Yeah, but it is a new approach, and it's also difficult because sometimes if you play a rock mix, maybe it would be really annoying if anyone touches the panning. It was just be, what are you doing? The mix sounded good. Why should it move now? So it's a matter of of going in and out of tracking, I think, and finding a way and of when to use it. So what I just talked about was amplification of the human voice. Yeah.
It's not getting like if people are running around stage. It's not getting weird for the audience to. Or do you really experience that?
I really experienced that it helps because the small time in a production when it's amplified, the brain uses a small time. Oh, who's speaking? Oh, it's him or it's her. Of course you adapt to it. Of course it can sound good, but when we track it, someone enters and says something, and everybody's just there, right at because the sound is there. So the sound is guiding your eyes, and it's not confusing at all. And following a dialogue, you simply forget that it's amplified. And I also have the feeling of when running the show with amplified tracking, because we don't play that loud, it's a slight amplification. If you are a little late with the fader, you can really feel because when it's amplified, you kind of forget that the speaker is actually playing, because your tension and your focus is at the actors speaking. So that's new.
But going back to with like music, if you have like two guitar player, running around, isn't that a point where you just get too?
Yeah, totally. I would put them in a fixed mix. I would really put the music in a fixed position, because it can be. I heard that Björk is doing some weird stuff, and it can really be an artistic, annoying decision to having what they called the dinosaur effect when the animation team showed some of the first animation for Jurassic Park. The sound guys did some very, very cool stuff, putting a lot of things in the rears, and the producers that were meant to see these stunning visual effects, they didn't see them, because they turned to follow the audio and have the same way in a theater room. If you do the helicopter flying there, it's simply just annoying. So you have to be humble and focused about it. So for me, it's a creative discussion, and it's really important to stick to that constant evaluation and to distinguish between a rock mix and amplification of voice.
How would you deal with depth on stage? And if there's an actor there and they went to stage, you'd expect it.
I would add time, even without a tracking system. Having a stage on the channel, on the mixer, adding delay time when an actor is moving back really helps, because you still keep the acoustic in sync with the speakers. And it can be done by tracking as well. Then there's a discussion of what happens when you go back in terms of image. Should you narrow it down or widen it up? And when you go out here, what happens? Should you play on more speakers or on less speakers? And that's something that the gatekeeper softwares can do as well. Some call it width, or you can work with dynamic width, having a zone. If I go over here, it should only be this speaker, none of these. Or if I go in the middle, it should be all of them. So it's a decision you can make. But even without a tracking system, I would simply suggest that if you do amplification on stage, just on channel base, adding time when someone works back is amazing, because you keep the tension at the actor's voice, man.
With that new tracking system you were going to test out that uses like the camera positioning, are there any concerns about like if there's like a lot of people on stage at once?
Totally.
Confused.
Totally. And I think it will get confused. But I heard that it can combine protocols. So it can combine RF-based identifier for each actor with the camera intelligence. And that sounds, I was relieved to hear that, because in a creative space, I mean, the actors change wigs and costumes, and how should an AI system know anything about that? But they say that it's a combination, but we will know in January.
If it's using,
what
do you think the camera like layer of tracking adds to the
precision. Because it will be pixel perfect precision, so the light people are very interested as well. Because I would say this system, I think it has a precision of half a meter or something. 10 centimeters. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Then, but the TTA system that we use, I would say that it's around half a meter. And on large venues, it's enough for us. 10 centimeters, even better. I saw the demo with this ball before. It was amazing. It was, yeah. A few words about calibration, because I saw a demo of SACTRAC being calibrated, and it's fast. You need to tell the plane and the size, and then you have some calibration tools that you put a beacon on stage, and this is the 0 point, and this is on one of the axes or on another axis. So it's becoming more. It's the same with Timex now. There you need to input the data as well, but it's becoming more accessible and easier to use.
If you don't mind me saying, at one VM I will explain about Zap tracking.
Yeah.
And then the questions about other tracking systems, I'm interested to answer those.
No, but that's interesting, and I think that because we got a demo at SACTRAC as well, that if we could afford it right now, it would be an improvement in many ways. I don't know about the camera-based stuff, because if it works, it would definitely be cheaper on the long term. Maybe in 10 years, I don't know. But I'm product independent. I can only guess, and that's nice. Any more questions?
I actually had one. Did you find that it was a long journey to convince the people who signed the checks that it was worth switching from this system that has been working for as long as we've had speakers, really, until...
Yeah, that's a good point, because who wants this? Because we don't hear any complaints about stuff, so it is difficult. But just this communication, the awareness of it, because when you have experienced this, there's kind of no way back. You need to do it, but it is difficult.
Because I've been to some shows where they're using localization in a spatial audio system, and I remember thinking that it was extremely compelling that your attention is indeed drawn to whoever is speaking or singing. But I also felt, as a nerd myself, that no one else in the audience is consciously aware, oh, wasn't it amazing that I was singing from where they were? Because if it's done right,
Exactly. Yeah, so we have to keep our tattoos on the inside of the body in a way, and just be proud ourselves. I had the same experience with Pinocchio, because everything works and it's tracking, and isn't that amazing? But I haven't heard one single word from no one about it. But I'm sure, I'm really convinced that this is not just nerdish fascination. It is natural, because it's about forgetting all the expensive, heavy speakers and being immersed into the drama. So that's what it's about. We did a production at Old Stage Inden for Murene, and it opened in 1912. It was played for the first time, and I guess that it was not tracked at that time. But we did a remake of it last year, and it was tracked, and the artistic director, Kasper Holten, noticed it. And it was good for us, because he said, oh, this is the way to do it. Now I understand. So that was good. So it's spreading.
Yeah. Can you explain, just in brief, just very short, how because I don't know the tracking system is communicating with the mixing system?
Yeah. It's OSC data, so it's like X and Y and Z as well. Not all systems do the Z, and it's a discussion also about the stage scenery, when we want to do it and when we don't. OSC data with an identifier of a ID that relates to a specific channel. And these OSC data you can send from a lot of programs as well. You can send it from, it's the same for SpaceMap Go, I think, and or apps, Touch OSC, or QLab has a network queue with a 2D representation as well. So it's just generic OSC data, like a stream of data. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One question for the orchestral mix that you said you will be more
manually? How do you go about that practically? Because I guess.
Yeah, on the practical side, all microphones, I think there was 51 microphones into the mixing console, direct outs from each channel. And that's because you're used to some things and you kind of lose control in a way. It's a new way of working. All these direct outs hits in this case, the DNB DS100, representing an input called an object. And this object is placed in a visual arena representing the stage. The software behind knows the exact proportions of the stage and the speaker position. And when you place that object in this XY arena, then the calculation is done so that this signal is sent out to the specified speakers with the right delay. And there are a lot of things that is done automatically. It's a little, in the beginning I didn't like it because I felt that I lost control of what's going on. But they have introduced some parameters like the width. You can how wide should it be, but that's it. So I heard a lot of people saying that you have to think in another way, because what if you have a drum mix and you want to send it to a stereo group and do something with it? Then you could choose that, okay, then let's do that to a drum mix, a stereo group, but then we could send this stereo group out to a tracking system, because now the drum podium moves. So now it's really essential that we do track it. So it's as I said, a constant creative evaluation, and you can get a long way with all these reflections, even without a tracking system, just doing fixed positions, just thinking, okay, he's there now for the next scene, then we do this distribution as a stationary preset. Yeah? Any more questions? Yeah.
I was curious because when I like to use them to sort of like give a natural representation of sound. Has there been any production where you have used it with a more artistic effect? There are, at least the way I see it, some possibilities in doing weird new stuff or pushing the boundaries of what can be done.
Yeah,
production.
You can do it, but sometimes it's like shooting small birds with a cannon, because sometimes there should always be a reason for it. So it should relate with something visual. Otherwise, we could simply just program the movement or use other tools to do moving soundscapes or flybys or things. We can do it in a lot of ways. But as soon as it relates with improvisation or objects moving, it could really benefit from being tracked. But I understand what you mean. So, yeah, a lot of things could be handled this way. In terms of video, it's interesting as well, because the Disguise video server, for example, has this approach with having a 3D representation of the stage as well. And when you can track things precise enough, you can start painting video surfaces on stuff, following moving objects. And when it's camera-based and pixel-perfect, you can, and I've seen this, do stuff that is like painted on the surface, following totally smooth stage scenery being moved around. I think sometimes it's a limitation in Denmark that the productions do not play that long, and we don't have that much tech time. So sometimes it's difficult to implement simply because we don't either have the budget or the time. Or the will, because it's only playing for a month. So that's annoying. But at the permanent venues, it should definitely be considered when installing new equipment. Some way, some approach to source-orientated reinforcement, as you could call it, as well. The focus on where's the source coming from. Okay, but thanks for coming.